Welcome to the Mindful Movement Show. We're your hosts, Tony and Amanda Johnson.
This is a podcast dedicated to helping moms and dads heal their hurts, transform their health from the inside out, and become the best people, partners, and parents they can possibly be.
Our mission is to normalize struggle and profile stories of resilience, character building, and the process of healing and becoming.
In Season 1, we spotlight healers from a variety of modalities who are also parents. We hope you enjoy the show. Morning, beautifuls. This is Tony Johnson.
And Amanda Johnson.
And thank you so much for tuning in to the Mindful Movement Show. This morning, we have a blessing and honor to welcome Kelli O'Brien Watson. She is our coach, and she is also a best-selling author and presenter and the owner of Studio 8 Academy, an online holistic wellness education center. She is also the co-founder of Scripter Publishing Group, a publishing company dedicated to helping inspire people share their stories and publish their books.
Kelli holds a master's degree in counseling education and certifications in personal training, TRX, and youth fitness. She's the author of Kelli's Quips, Happy Thoughts for Busy People, and Finding My Way Back to Me, A Journey of Self-Discovery. She has also co-authored several books, including most recently the Amazon bestseller, Author University.
She is a platinum level coach for the Todd Durkin Mastermind Group and the VP of the Impact Coaching Certification Program, where she provides business and personal development coaching for professionals around the world. She also runs a life coaching program called Finding My Way Back to Me and hosts a podcast called It Just Takes One.
We are blessed to consider Kelli a mentor and a friend. She has shaped our life in so many profound ways. She has been our coach for several years now and is working to help us publish our books and grow our business. Kelli is a great listener, teacher, and both a gracious and knowledgeable soul. We're so grateful to have Kelli on the show today to discuss her background, upbringing, and process of becoming a parent, entrepreneur, and coach.
We'll also discuss some of her struggles in life and love, and she'll reveal the tools and strategies she has used to learn how to heal and grow. Finally, we'll discuss her views on spirituality, family, and her insights on the ways in which we can practice consciousness raising to grow the mindful movement around the globe. Kelli, welcome.
We are so excited to have you and to be part of this conversation. How are things going for you in New York this morning?
Everything is going so well. It's so beautiful to watch the two of you and be here on this with the two of you. Just as we were getting on, I said, this is the first time I've ever been interviewed by two people at once. And because I know you so well and I see how beautifully you integrate, it's such a joy for me to watch the two of you working together and to actually be participating in this and getting to enjoy the two of you. So thank you for inviting me.
Thank you again. Go ahead, Tim.
So we always believe that our experiences shape who we are and how we show up in the world. So we kind of start every podcast with that fundamental assumption, trying to give you space to tell your story. So can you please share with our audience how you believe your experiences shape how you show up in the world as a person, partner, parent, and coach?
Well, we could write a book on that, couldn't we? That's not a short answer question. But, as you said that, our experiences help shape who we become. It almost reminds me of the title of my podcast, It Just Takes One, because the whole reason that I came up with that title was for this exact point that you're making, that you have moments in life. It might be an experience that you met somebody. It might be an experience that you didn't expect. It might be an experience that you were overjoyed about, or that was the worst thing ever. But it's a moment that changes everything, right? And it just takes one of those. It just takes one of those to change the entire trajectory of your life. So I completely love this concept. I obviously named my podcast for that. And, I think to just briefly say some of those moments for me, some of those experiences that shaped me. Growing up, I had two incredibly wonderful parents. And I'm fortunate to still have my dad here with me on this life. My mother passed away 7 years ago, but I had a very good, strong relationship with them. I still do with both of them. And they certainly helped shape me. So many of the lessons that I've learned, I've just taken from them. And I really, truly believe that so many of the gifts I I was given were gifts that came through them. So my parents and the experiences I had as a young girl, the middle child of 3, with these 2 very strong, very solid parents, really were the foundation for who I became. And I often still hear myself repeating a phrase that my father might have said, or a phrase that my mother might have said. So I still believe all of that continues to shape me even now. So, I could go on and on with other fork in the road experiences, or it just takes one moment. But I think, as a starting point, the foundation of my family, my parents, is a really important one to mention.
Yeah. And I think we're going to get into great detail about your childhood and some of the experiences that imprinted how impactful you are in people's lives. And most immediately your family, but also all of the people who have been blessed to be coached by you, us most especially. And to start, I think we want to start to talk about Kelli, the parent and the partner first. Mm-hmm. So can you please discuss the shape and the composition of your family? I believe you have 5 kids, right?
Correct. I have 3 of my own and 2 stepchildren. That's right.
That's amazing. Can you talk about their ages and where they are in life at this point?
Absolutely. So their ages are 25, 24, 23, 22, and 20. So they're just right in a row. And my son, 25 years old, he is literally, as we speak, moving into his first apartment. He's just literally, the moving van pulled out this morning. So he has a job here where he is a manager of a local restaurant, and is just moving into his first apartment right now, just, elevating to that next phase of adulthood. My 24-year-old stepdaughter, Caitlin, she lives in Worcester, Massachusetts. She is going to be beginning a physician assistant medical program starting in January. My 23-year-old daughter, Katie, is in Scotland as we speak. She is getting her master's degree at the University of Glasgow in museum studies. So she is over in Scotland, just soaking up the culture and life over there, and really, truly enjoying her studies. My stepson, Cameron, is in New Hampshire right now. He is studying at Southern New Hampshire University and will be finishing his bachelor's degree in business this year. And my 20-year-old, our youngest, Kira, is, as we speak, in Patagonia, Chile, on a field research semester where she is researching the effect of climate change on endangered species in Patagonia. And she is having the adventure and the experience of, speaking of experiences, of a lifetime. So that is those are the 5 children. And then my husband, Graham, here as well. So that's the shape. And I should probably mention our dog, Cody, who is an integral and important part of our family.
That's amazing. And it sounds like a very busy family. It sounds like everyone is doing really amazing things. And so this might be somewhat of a challenging question, but if you can take a step back and reflect on those years that you've been a parent, what are some of the moments maybe that you have felt most fulfilled as a parent, if you don't mind sharing that with us?
Most fulfilled as a parent? Boy, I couldn't feel it any more than I feel literally in this moment, as my last one is literally, leaving the nest as we speak here. Every phase of parenting has its own beauty and wonder, and each stage that those kids go through presents its own challenges and its own rewards. And, any of you who are parents know exactly what I'm speaking of, because it's exactly what you're living. So I'm extremely fulfilled right now. Certainly when each of them chose the path after high school that they wanted to go on and found their way to what they wanted to do, that was a very fulfilling moment. And then the accomplishments that they've had, certainly any time that they achieve something that they set out to do, or they've overcome a hurdle. And there are many, many for each of them. But those are certainly very fulfilling moments as a parent. And also probably the most fulfilling of those are the ones when they're challenged and they figure their way out, when they really are struggling with something and then they find their way through it and come out changed by that experience. And it's great to see them be able to do that and to work through that as they've grown up.
And with a family that is so spread out, I know that you and I have talked previously about how special it is to have them back home. And with 2 little ones where we're in the thick of it all the time, it's difficult to even think forward about that place or that part of our parenting journey. But can you talk about what it's like to have them back in your home or in your presence after being away?
I always call it mother duck is the most happy when the chicks are all in the nest.
I love that.
And I don't care, as excited as I am for them to each be out literally all over the world finding their way, there is nothing that beats hearing them breathing in their beds as they go to sleep at night. That moment where you can just pause and listen and they're right here. It's just, makes you want to hug them as you speak about it. Yeah, that's a really special thing when they come home. And I think like anything in life, right? When you've got the contrast to compare it to, so they've been gone, they've been literally out in the outskirts of the world, and then they come back. So you appreciate when they're gone, and then you appreciate it even more because of the contrast when they come home. So that's, it is, I look forward to that. I look forward to the moment when they're all here at the holidays and I can hear them, enjoying sleeping in their own beds.
That's so wonderful.
That's beautiful.
And I think you're kind of speaking to, the idea that you kind of have to have the other experience in order to make the current one significant. So, you have to have some of the good in order to, or some of the bad to experience the good. And kind of on that note, are there, especially because we are sharing this podcast with other parents who might be in the thick of it, would you be open to sharing maybe some of the experiences that you've had as a parent that have challenged you? And what tools have you used to overcome those moments?
Mm-hmm. Oh, where do you begin with the challenges of a parent? I'll speak recently because obviously those are easy for me to remember and they're so present. My son has been wanting to move out for a while. He's been saving up. He's been looking. He's been waiting for the right moment. He graduated college in 2020 in the middle of the pandemic. That's right. 4 of our kids graduated in the pandemic. There's another one.
Wow.
So 2020 he graduated and he's been home ever since, and he's been working, but he's been living at home. And it's, what it feels like. It's like you want to spread your wings. It's great to be rooted, but you want to branch out. You want to spread your wings and go. And so he's been really struggling with that and struggling with how to make that happen and what's the right fit and where do I go. And as a parent, it's challenging to watch that, to see that, and to know that he will figure it out and allow him to just do it without trying to fix it and figure it out for him. That's always challenging. We tend to want to push them along because we might see something that we think is the answer, and then we've taken away the ability for them to do it. So I think, learning to stand back, watch them struggle, watch them be challenged, allow them to, because that's the way that they figure it out. That's a hard thing as a parent. I remember this is something that someone told me when Marcus was really young. And she said to me, Kelli, remember that your job as a parent is not to do this. Hug them close. Your job as a parent is to do this. And at the time, every bit of me rebelled. I was like, no, I just want to hold him right here. I just, I love being a mom and he's a baby and he needs me and I love that. But I've always remembered that my job is not to hold them down here. It's to give them that and also teach them to do that. That's hard, right? That's really hard as a parent. So that's certainly one of the big challenges that I've experienced. I'm sure you guys probably understand that even with your young kids, watching them be challenged, even with something as basic as, standing up. You have to let them do it. They have to fall. They have to get back up. They have to wobble. They have to, and then they get it. But as a parent, you want to protect them. You want to make sure they're okay. You don't want them to fall. You don't want them to get hurt. So it's sort of, there's that push and pull of those two things.
It's kind of interesting you bring that up because we are in the middle of that right now with our youngest, Ellie. She is 11 months learning to walk. And part of that is literally watching her fall, watching her make mistakes. And she can't learn to walk or she can't learn not to do something sometimes until she realizes like, oh, that kind of hurt, or I need to stand like this. And so it's kind of interesting as a young parent and hearing you and with your experiences, it's almost like the first step for us, the first experience in letting her try to take her own steps, right? And it's kind of wild.
And to be honest, right now she has a cut in the middle of, in between her eyes from where she was walking and hit her head on a table. And you sit back and you're like, I have a feeling that this is a metaphor for the future, right? Where there will be so many bumps and bruises that we want to stop and prevent, but that she'll have to figure out on her own.
That's right. There are so many kids that have like little scars on the edges of their eyes, right? Where they get something as they fall. And yeah, it changes in sense of what the experience is that causes it, but it's the same thing no matter what stage they're in.
Yeah. And I think we're speaking to something that is, part of the reason we're doing this, which is to normalize the idea that everyone struggles. Because our experience as being young parents in the pandemic, first-time parents in the pandemic, is that we felt so alone in our pain so often. And I have a sense intuitively that there are people that are still feeling that type of pain of loneliness and isolation. Can you please offer whatever wisdom or advice you have for any parents who might be struggling with guilt, shame, or childhood pain?
These are deep questions, aren't they? I mean, again, those are not superficial, quick answers. They're deep questions. You've spoken to one of the comments I'll make, which is that it is normal. It is normal. It was Will Smith who, and some interview that I saw him on years and years and years, the kids were young. And he said it this way. He said, I went and bought a TV and it was the most magnificent, like 60-inch, huge, whatever TV. I couldn't wait to get it on my wall. And I get it home and I'm pulling it out of the box and the carton and all the foam and everything else. And then there's a manual, and the manual is about 4 inches thick. And it tells you how to set it up, and that's about 1 inch. And then the 3 inches that are left were all troubleshooting. Like, if this happens, do this. And if that happens, do that. And he's like, this is just the most amazing TV ever. Like, it has everything I need. And if I ever have a problem, I've got it. So then his wife, Jada, has a baby. And you know how when you're leaving the hospital with the baby for the first time and they wheel you out and the mother's carrying the baby and you're completely uncertain about, can you even get them in a car seat? And oh my gosh, are these people really letting you take this thing home? Like, what do they think you can do? And he says, so, we get the baby into the car seat and we get Jada into the car, and I turn to the woman and I hold my hands out and she says, what do you need? And he says, I need the manual. Where's the guide? And it's funny, but it's true. We have this 4-inch thick manual of troubleshooting for a TV, but nobody gives you the manual for parenting, the most important thing you'll probably ever do. And so it is so much trial and error. It is so much hit or miss. So my best advice is guilt and shame are a lot of wasted energy. They don't move you forward. They leave you stuck. So in whatever way you can move through those feelings and get onto something more productive, good for you, because you can't help from a place of being stuck. Recognize that making mistakes is normal. Nobody is a perfect parent. There's no perfect situation. It's a practice. It's a trial and error. It's a troubleshooting guide. and keep trying to fail forward. Keep trying to move forward, because your kids are moving forward. And you need to be there with them. So I could go on and on and on that topic, but I'll leave with that. It's normal, and don't spend a lot of time with guilt and shame. Move forward through that and get better, do better, try more, and be there for your kids.
Yeah. And I know at Studio 8, you encourage the people you work with to practice mindfulness meditation, to not dwell or get stuck on shame or pain, but to notice it and allow it to move through their present moment. So can you speak to how you believe mindfulness and mindful movement help parents cope and result in well-rounded children?
Oh yeah, 100% agree with you, Tony. And you know this, I'm a huge believer and practice meditation regularly. In fact, I was just meditating before we got on this just to get myself centered and grounded. I could go into the whole science behind this, but I will encourage your readers, if they're interested in this, there's a great book called Whole Brain Living by Dr. Jill Bolte Taylor, where she goes into the science of how mindfulness actually is a balance to the fear center of our brain, where shame and blame and guilt and all those feelings reside. And so practicing some kind of mindfulness, whether it's meditation or prayer, walking meditation, all of that is very good. Movement, 100%, because anytime we move our body, we move our emotions. You can't move one without the other. And so if your emotions are stuck, move your body. It'll get them moving. And if your emotions are overflowing, move your body and it'll help temper and balance it out. So movement is important. Taking time to just be present, be still, breathe, listen to a guided meditation, or just sit and turn your face up to the sun. You know, it seems so simple, but it's often hard to do, especially when you're very elevated in that fear center, when there's a lot of energy going there. It's hard to calm yourself down, to breathe, which is why you have to practice it. And you have to practice it when times are good, so that it's a tool that you can reach for when times are not so good.
And you speak so many truths to power there. Number one, that it's called a practice because we need to practice when we are not triggered, when our nervous system is not engaged, our sympathetic nervous system is not reacting, so that we can train the parasympathetic nervous system to be resilient and to kick in when we need to take a breath in response to something, as opposed to lashing out irrationally. Also, I love that you mention movement moves emotion, because that speaks to my experience and what I try to help people with every day. Because growing up, I did not move, and I did have a lot of anxiety and a lot of swirling depressive thoughts. And it wasn't until I started to move my body on a consistent basis did a lot of that kind of dissipate, and we experienced some level of freedom from being shackled by those thoughts, or the permanence of those thoughts. So thank you for sharing. And we'll kind of move on, because you mentioned speaking to some of the hard to process emotions or experiences.
And I'm curious what you believe the role of mindfulness and mindful movement is in parenting well-rounded children.
The more balanced you feel, and I say that with a little bit tongue in cheek, because I don't think it's not really so much balance. Maybe it's harmony. The more harmonious you are, the more, in tune with yourself, the better you can handle any situation. So we always have the thing we can control. The thing we always have in any experience or situation is our response to it. That's what we have control of. We don't have control of what our kids are doing. We don't have control of what they're saying, how they're behaving, how they're acting. We don't have any control of that. What we have control of is how we respond to it. And if we are not practicing some kind of mindfulness, we tend to get into reactive mode. And so we blow up at them. We are quick or short with them. And they then react back to us, and typically not a great way either. And it can just disintegrate the whole communication pattern. When you've practiced mindfulness, you learn how to step back from the reaction and observe and notice first. Typically, however they're behaving is meeting some kind of a need that they have. And if you're just reacting to the behavior and you don't step back and observe the need, then you're just perpetuating and creating an elevation of the behavior. Where if you've practiced mindfulness, if you can understand that there is a way to take a deep breath, to pause, to hold still, to see something different, it allows you to actually begin to understand what the need is that they're calling for. And then you can react in a much more positive way by meeting the need rather than addressing the behavior. And it changes the response in the child. So, that's just one, I think, really strong example. Creating that harmony in ourselves allows us to then better respond to the needs of our children.
Thank you. That's so beautiful. Yeah. Kind of transitioning from I guess, participating mindfully in relationships. Tony and I have both navigated divorces before finding one another and deciding to grow our family. And we know that you are also, you have experienced a divorce. And I think for some people, you kind of left a lifestyle that our culture, for many people, just, dream of in some respects. And I'm wondering if you can take us back to that time in your life and speak to lessons or wisdom that you might want to share with people who feel like they're not in a fulfilling partnership. Maybe even tools like mindfulness or presentness with the other person. It's, where they find themselves in their relationship. It's just kind of, that's not meeting the needs of where they're at.
Absolutely. I don't think anybody ever gets into a marriage thinking divorce is the outcome. None of us entered it with that intention. And so when it happens, there are so many complex layers of emotion that go into that. Typically, I have found just in my work with coaching and even in my own experience, I believe people come into our lives when they need to be there. And there is a moment when that need has been fulfilled and they may move on. We may move on because the need has been satisfied and it's time to move to whatever is next on our path. So people come into our lives when we need them and they move on when we don't need them in the same way anymore. That's an easy thing to say when you're sitting here, 14 or 15 years post-divorce. Yeah. It certainly was not easy to say in those moments where it was becoming more and more real that our relationship, despite everything we had tried, was just not gelling for either of us and especially for our children. It was a very difficult time then. But hindsight is always 20/20 and perspective changes. So I can easily say now it was exactly what was supposed to happen, although it didn't feel that way then. So if you are a person who is in a challenging relationship, I am certainly not a proponent of divorce by any means. I think every relationship gives us an opportunity to learn more about ourselves. Who are we in relation to that person? Which part of us is showing up in relation to that person? And we always have the ability to continue to grow ourselves in that relationship should we choose to. So I'm certainly not a proponent of divorce, but I'm also not someone who's negative about divorce. I truly believe there are times when it's run its course and it's time. But I will tell you, one of the things that I get asked very often, or that when I have spoken with people that have been through divorce or recently gone through a separation or a divorce, is always the fear about the kids. There's always the fear about, well, what about the kids? Or maybe we should stay together because of the kids, or, all those justifications that we try and create. And here's what I've learned. And my kids, I think, would say the same thing. It'd be interesting to hear what they would have to say, actually, but I think they would say a similar thing. Your kids will always get what you give them. So if you're having a challenging divorce and you're struggling and you're telling your kids that it's the worst thing ever and you're struggling and you're just always breaking down in front of them and you can't get it together, or you're fighting or arguing with your spouse, and they're seeing and getting all the time that it's the worst thing ever, well, that's what they're going to take away from it. And they'll absorb that in whatever way they will. But you also have a choice to give them that this is actually okay, that this is a good step forward, that this is something that's going to help the family rather than hurt the family. And if you truly believe that, you can't fake that. You have to believe that. But if you're going to the divorce, I hope you believe that. I hope you believe that it's the best thing for everybody, because it's such a painful thing. If you're not doing it because you think it's the best thing, then maybe it's not. But I think the kids, my point being is that the kids will take what you give them. And so it's really important that you really think about that message. What is it that's causing this relationship to break? And what is the good part of that? What is the thing that's going to make that better for everybody? And make sure that your kids know that and see that, so that they see the potential rather than just the detriment. Of course, kids are scared, but then who's to say? Then this is the other thing. What you'll never know is how would they be impacted if you were in that relationship and it was still a horrible relationship. So you stayed together for them, but the relationship is awful. You're either arguing all the time or you're distant. So your kids are now getting this role modeling of a broken relationship. that's going to impact them too if that's what you give them. So be mindful about the message that you're giving to your kids. Make sure it's one where they see the potential and the growth rather than just the negativity. And then allow that to happen. And then they'll find their way. They'll find their way because their path is their own, and how they choose to respond to it will be theirs. But I think as a parent, that's the best thing that you can do.
I really appreciate your answer. I think that's incredibly insightful. And what you said reminds me of this quote, and I hope I'm not like twisting it too much, but basically people enter your life for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. Mm-hmm. And what I'm hearing you say is that even if you find yourself in a partnership that is unfulfilling, try to look for the takeaways that you can, be grateful for, really, I guess, in every relationship, there's something that you can use to transform your own life, that you can kind of find the silver lining of. And I think that's really beautiful,
You also spoke to something that's really, really important for listeners to take to mind and heart, and that is our relationships with ourselves are often a mirror to our relationship with others. Yeah. And that, our definition of love as a couple is the daily and moment-to-moment decision to choose your perfectly imperfect partner every day. And at the end of the day, the relationships that are failing or need to be moved on from are the ones where both parties are not willing to do the work as individuals and as a collective to exactly what you're speaking about, which is model healthy, sustainable practices, even imperfect, but healthy and sustainable practices to their kids. Mm-hmm. And so I'd like to honor that answer, because I think it's several prongs of it speak to the truth of the situation, which is divorce is neither good or bad, right? It is, and it happens. But what is most important is what happens after or in the process. Because my parents got divorced after 3 different times of getting back together for the kids. And that part was the hardest because it created a sense of uncertainty. Every time they got back together, you would get hopeful and excited and totally thrilled. And then it would be another heartbreak. And then by the last time, it was the most painful thing imaginable, because not only did it happen in the middle of the night, my dad walked away, but it was finality. And so remember that no matter what your ride looks like, your kids are on the ride with you. Yeah. And it can be a roller coaster, or it could just be a journey. Mm-hmm. And you get to determine that based on how you relate to yourself first.
That's right. And it goes back to why you said what we said earlier, and what you mentioned earlier too, Tony, is that when you've trained your system, when you've trained your parasympathetic system to be able to handle stressful situations and to balance that out, then you're much better able to intentionally make those kind of choices rather than just, again, reacting to the situation or the emotion of the moment.
And we've spoken about it, and we'll speak about it till the end of our days. Emotional regulation is the most important skill that we can learn in this modern age that demands so much of us. Mm-hmm. Kelli, thank you so much for sharing honestly and openly. Now that we understand a little bit more about your recent history, let's take a journey to understand more about the relationship you had with your parents. I was so moved by your podcast episode, the very first episode of It Just Takes One, because you had that episode with your parents, and in it, you just have the most beautiful dialogue with them about the lessons they taught you. I'd like to really take a moment to honor that conversation and zoom in on it a bit. Your parents met and fell in love in primary school and were together until the day your mom passed away. Can you discuss the lessons you've learned about love, commitment, and conflict resolution from your parents in their relationship?
Yeah, my parents were one of those rare couples that were together their whole life, right? So I always think that's something very special. And I don't know the secret to that. I don't know what it is that makes that possible for some people and not others. I don't know, but it worked for my parents. One thing that I learned from that is the depth of love that comes when you have such a shared life, that it's not just a few experiences, but literally they grew up together. And so the depth of their love was something that you can only have with that long lasting kind of relationship. To this day, 7 years after my mother passed away, my dad was actually in tears last week when I was speaking to him about how much he misses my mom, and just the very special camaraderie, I guess, that he had with her. She just got him and he just got her because they had been together for so long.
That's beautiful.
They showed that love, certainly in a physical way, in a service-oriented way, in words of appreciation for each other. But one of the ways that makes me smile to think of it is they loved to dance. And for our generation, somewhere around my generation and maybe down to yours and a little bit lower and a little higher than mine, we lost the ability to dance the way they danced. So the way that our parents, right? We always think like that. There was a whole generation and generations that danced. My mom and dad learned to dance together on my mother's front porch. So they would talk about how all the neighborhood kids would come together onto her front porch, and they'd put a record player on and plug it in from inside the house and bring it out so it was through the door. And they'd spin their records back in the 1950s while they were growing up. And they learned all the dances, the jitterbug and the twist, and all the dances of those eras. And till the day, literally the week before she passed away, my parents were dancing in the living room. And
wow,
I see pictures of them dancing now, and it just fills me up. And I just think there's something about that is very symbolic of who they were. They moved together. They supported each other. They were so proud of each other. And I was so fortunate to be a witness to all of that and to be able to be a part of it.
That is so
gorgeous.
powerful and beautiful. And it speaks to something we spoke about earlier, in that life and relationships are often a push and a pull. And one of us might be ebbing and the other might be flowing. And to be able to have the achievement of a lifelong love is one thing, but to also understand that was full of painful moments, and that was full of beautiful moments, and that was full of everything in between. And to hear it in their voice, how much they loved each other and how much they loved you, was another thing that I picked up and that made tears come to my eyes.
So your dad was a principal, and in the podcast interview, he astutely pointed out that kids don't necessarily listen to what you say, but they certainly watch what you do, especially under adverse conditions. He said, we can walk on water when it's frozen, but what happens when it thaws out and the waves are moving? I'm wondering if you can tell us about a time in which you learned how to navigate adversity based on watching your parents.
Sure. Which time? let me choose one. Yeah, I'll say two things while I'm pulling up the one that I think will be most impactful. You mentioned that hearing the love in their voice was something in the love for me. And I think I said this to you, Tony. I listened to that not too long ago, not too long before you had said you had listened to it. And the first thing my mother says when she comes on the podcast is, it's so good to hear your voice. And I play that over and over because 7 years after she's passed away, all I can think is, no, Mom, it's so good to hear your voice, because I miss my mom's voice, right? I just miss hearing it. So yes, the warmth in their voice is something that brings me to tears as well. And the other thing I was thinking is, as you were talking about my dad and what he said, is you can hear my dad's very wise. My dad's a very wise person, and he often would give those kinds of lessons that he's learned, and that those are the kinds of things I hear coming out of my mouth at times. So I know that I absorbed a lot of that from them. So one of the times where I learned how to navigate adversity was when I was in high school. So my dad was my principal, which I loved. My friend group for a couple of years called my dad Dad. So everybody would say Dad, which I just thought was awesome. He loved it. But I just thought it was, I don't know, it just made me feel special, I'm sure. But it also just felt like if I needed something, he was right there. So it was great for me. My sister, the year ahead of me, graduated as valedictorian of her class. Well-deserved, very high academics, my sister's one of the most intelligent people I know. She's just brilliant. So she graduated as valedictorian of her class. She had a goal to get to that, and she worked really hard to get to it. I was also a very good and very gifted student. I never had a goal to be valedictorian, but I ended up being valedictorian as well. So 2 years in a row, 2 O'Briens are valedictorians, and Mr. O'Brien is the principal. So some of the gossip starts that somehow that was given, or, that it wasn't earned, and, all those kinds of things that people in a small town start to whisper about, and it just spread.
Wow.
Some parents of my friends said some pretty awful things to me. My friends moved away, just kind of shut me out. It was a really challenging time for me because it was a very small school. I graduated with 112 students. So it was not a big community. Everybody knew us. My dad's the principal. My mother was an elementary teacher. We're a well-known family in that small community. And it was certainly earned. It was not given to me by any means. I worked hard.
Yeah.
But it was a challenging time, and it was my senior year. And so I remember having a conversation with my mom and dad about it. And they were struggling because they couldn't fix it either. They couldn't go around saying that's not true, because then it just makes people want to fight it more, right? And they knew that I was struggling with it, and they were seeing what was happening, and they just wanted to protect me, but they knew they couldn't. So I had a conversation with them, and they said to me something that I've already said on this podcast. The one thing that you control, Kelli, is how you respond to the situation. So decide how you want to respond, and then do that. And that made me stop and think, oh, I get to choose how I respond. I didn't realize that I was making that choice, or had that control. And so I made a decision that this wasn't about me. It was about them. It was a statement about whatever was going on with them, that they were willing to listen to gossip or, play into that. It didn't change who I was, didn't change what I had accomplished. And so I was just going to be me. And let them be who they were. And that was the way I decided to handle it. But it was because my parents gave me that. They gave me that seed and allowed me to think it out and figure it out for myself. And I'm good friends with some of those people still today. It all worked out. And to this day, who cares? Yes, it was an important moment in my life, but valedictorian doesn't go that like nobody cares at this point. It's not like it's a lifelong thing. But it was a great lesson to learn at that moment.
Yeah. And you spoke to so many things that I want to reflect. The first is that oftentimes the wisdom our parents impart on us, we soak up and we pass on. And their response to adversity had to be learned from somewhere, their own experience, their parents. And for listeners who may be struggling, it's again a very important reminder to be centered within yourself as you are, especially relating to your kids, and not to participate in the gossip, the drama, and to remind them by choosing to rise above it, and letting them know they have a choice. And one of the ways your dad undoubtedly learned resilience is by being in the service academy. And I was astounded by the moment in the podcast where it came up that your mom wrote him a letter every single day while he was abroad. And some of the letters were 5 to 6 pages. Number one, Todd Durkin, who we know, also has a very powerful and profound experience with handwritten letters. His father, who passed away, wrote him one every week while in college. And so I wanted to really speak about this because you mentioned that we don't dance the same way we used to. And also nowadays, with such quick and easy access to communication, I don't believe we interact or communicate the way we used to. So can you speak to the power of a handwritten letter from your perspective?
Such a great thing. I'm so glad you brought that up. Yes, my mother did that every day he was away. And even as we were growing up, handwritten letters, always handwritten letters. And I do the same with my kids. When there's something really meaningful I want to share with them, I write them a handwritten letter because they read it and then they tuck it away. It's not a text that gets deleted or scrolled past or, not seen because it was in the midst of everything else. You have something important to say, handwrite it and let them keep it and digest it and come back to it and sift through it and process it, right? You cannot do that with any of those other kinds of communication. It is a beautiful gift to be able to write. And it does not have to be poetic, and it does not have to be something that's edited or, some feeling like it needs to be perfectly written. No, it needs to be from your heart. It needs to be something that is that you're feeling. It's bringing your feeling out onto the page in whatever matter that comes out. It's so special. And if you look in any of my kids' drawers, there's a little spot in there where they keep those handwritten letters. So who knows if they go back and read them, but they're there.
And I think that the initial response that someone might have in their head is, how do I have time to do that? My response to that is make time. You have time for what you make time for. And when you look back on it, on the relationship you have with your partner or your kids 10 years from now, you might have wished you had started that practice now.
That's right. I'll give you my mother's hint on that, by the way. So that was fine with my dad when she had one person to write to, and it was okay with 3 girls when she had 3 of us to write to. But when she ended up with 8 grandchildren, it was becoming a little bit unwieldy. So she heard, it was not her idea, but she heard and she took it as something that she did about story jars. And this is a brilliant idea for anybody out there who doesn't have time or doesn't like to write, but there are things that you want to share with your kids. So she had a pottery jar for each of her kids with the grandkids' names on them. And whenever something would come up that she either wanted to share with them as a lesson or something happened that was a cute little funny thing that happened, she would just take a slip of paper and write a sentence or 2 about it. Nothing that took any time, just a minute or 2 to write it down, and she puts it in the jar. To this day, those 8 jars are at my dad's house. And when the kids go, even now they can tell the stories, because for so many years when they would go to visit her, she would let them pick a story out of the jar and read it. They would read it and she would tell them the story. And they all know the stories by heart now. So it's really a beautiful way. If you feel like you don't have time, get a story jar. And at least they have that handwritten moment that you can share in a verbal storytelling way, and they can have that forever.
Honestly, that's beautiful.
That's gorgeous. And honestly, thinking about the time it takes to text versus to write something down on a piece of paper, I'm not sure it's entirely that different. So I think really it's just about, once again, integrating that mindfulness into your practice. And
that's legacy.
Yeah,
that's legacy. Those things are for decades, maybe centuries, going to be in your family and a reminder of the special moments you shared together. Yes. And a modified way to do this in the 21st century is in my Dad Edge group, which is the personal development group I am in for dads. And we started doing this, is in a book or in just a notebook or any piece of paper or even in your phone, save the moments throughout the year that take place that are funny with you and your kids, or that are enlightening, or that are really memorable, and then put those into a Shutterfly book to send to grandparents. And that was really a special idea that I think if people did that more often, they would be those legacy pieces, those mementos of our loving experiences.
Yeah, agreed.
So your dad referred to you as a problem solver, and he said you always found a way to take any problem and peel it apart like an onion, break it down into the separate pieces, and basically solve each piece in a creative way. I'm wondering if you can tell us about one of the greatest challenges that you faced, and how you use the approach of problem solving in order to, I guess, come upon an answer.
I was chuckling when he said that in that interview, because that's something I got from him. It's just how he is. He's the problem solver. So he just taught me how to do it. I think I solve problems in 2 different ways. I think, again, it's my dad, who was much more of an engineer, that type of thinking, and my mother, who was much more of a feeling person and much more intuitive. And I think I have both of those gifts that they've given me. And so I often feel for the problem first. I feel for the solution. So whatever the problem is, I'm sort of getting my gut read on these are the options, which one seems to feel like the right direction, and then peel that apart. Oftentimes by doing something as simple as writing pros and cons, just let's look at if that's going to be the option. What are the pros? What are the cons? And then what are the steps I need to take to get to that solution and, write those down. What's one example of that? Law school. So I made the decision to go to law school after college. I made that decision truthfully because I had no idea what else to do. Because many of us get out of college trying to figure out, okay, who are we going to be now? Now we're supposed to be grown up. What does that mean? I did not know what I wanted to do, but the law seems to, I felt like it was something I could do. And I had written my pros and cons, and there were a lot more pros than cons. And then I had my action steps of applying and where to go. And then I went. So I went to Tulane Law School, loved New Orleans, did not love law school. So I was there for a year. I struggled for a year. The first time in my life I ever struggled academically. It was really challenging for me because it wasn't the right fit. And when I knew it wasn't the right fit was in a group discussion where we were doing a study group on an issue, a legal issue, and people were advocating for a loophole in the law, which felt so wrong to me. And so I was feeling this is not where I want to be. I don't want to be the people that are advocating for that. I don't want to be the person that's going to be forcing that because that doesn't feel right to me. But now I have a problem because this isn't a fit. I've committed. I'm a year in. I don't know what else I want to do. I have nowhere else to go. I don't have a plan. But I felt very strongly intuitively that it was not the right solution. And so I made the decision to leave. I finished 1 year. It felt in many ways like an incomplete for many years. Maybe I'll go back someday, that kind of thing, because I just felt like a circle that wasn't closed. But it also felt very right. And my life got much better in terms of my direction and career after that. But I felt it. I made my pros and cons list. The cons of staying were getting to be much higher than the cons of leaving. So I ended up leaving after 1 year, and I made my plan. I had a written plan of where I was going to go, what I was going to do, and how I was going to get back on my feet. So that was a good example of that.
Tony keeps on flicking me because I had a very similar experience as well.
The exact same experience.
Yeah, I literally had the exact same experience.
West Coast instead of East Coast.
Yeah. I similarly, well, I guess when I was in college, I always anticipated, wanting to go to law school. I liked the idea of it. And same thing, like had an analytical mind. And so it just made sense. And I spent my first year in law school really struggling with the reality of what it was as opposed to what I thought it was going to be. And it's really interesting how you can think that something is going to be the perfect fit in life and how we can create these ideas in our mind of what it should be. And the reality is that sometimes things don't work out according to plan. And I think it's wonderful how you're describing a pivot, I guess you can say, but in a way that is uplifting, and you were able to be true to yourself, because who knows what would have happened, if you continued on in law school. And same with me. And there's nothing wrong with law school. There's nothing wrong with becoming a lawyer, but listening to your heart is just, that takes some courage. And so I certainly,
And I think that the conversation comes full circle yet again, because people come into your life for a reason, a season or a lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
And how funny is it, or how serendipitous is it that the person who coaches us has such a similar experience of following her heart to leave law school because it didn't feel right, and because there was a different path for them to create change in the ways that they wanted to, but maybe just not through the path that they expected.
And it's not like stopping from going to the grocery store, or maybe you want a different type of cheese. It's like law school is tremendous commitment. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of time. There's just so much invested in that. And so, yeah, I mean, it's inspiring to hear someone else who has gone through that and listen to their heart, because that is, I know firsthand, that is just such a challenging, it can be, or at least for me, it was such a challenging decision to make.
Another part of that episode that struck with me so much is the part where you're talking about how your dad taught you to play sports, because speaking of following your heart, the thing that I look forward to so much is to have that intimate, close relationship in play and in, the competitive parts too, but really just playing outdoor sports with my kids.
Oh my gosh, Tony's obsessed.
Can you talk about maybe from when he started teaching you how to play sports all the way up to now, some of those special moments that you got to share with your dad?
Oh, for sure. My dad was my first sports coach in every sport I ever played. My dad coached everything. I mean, he was literally the coach of everything and then the athletic director before he became the principal. He was an athlete through and through. You know, he played, he was a running back playing football in high school, and they were they were champions of their league at that time. And he went on to the Naval Academy. Just was a really athletic person. And then he had 3 girls. And back then, girls' sports were not what they are now. There just weren't as many opportunities for girls in sports, but he didn't care. He bought us our first skis. He bought us our first golf clubs. He bought us our first tennis rackets. He bought me my first football helmet when I was 8 years old. He bought me my first football helmet, taught us everything. And I have so many beautiful memories. Now, here's the irony of the whole thing. My dad was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis when he was 36. I think he speaks about that in the episode. Mm-hmm. So I was still young, when he was diagnosed. And, through the years, he has struggled with that systemic illness and beautifully, if I could say. My dad just has handled it incredibly well. But one by one, he lost his sports until golf was the last one he had. And to this day, he actually, this is the first year he didn't play golf ever. and that's because he's starting to feel it in his knees and things, and he's just afraid of hurting them too much. But he still works out every day, walks every day. He lifts light weights every day. So he's still very active. So I just have beautiful memories. Anytime that we were out golfing this weekend, and that's all because of my dad. And I love the Bills because of my dad. I went to my first Bills game when I was in 4th grade with my dad. I just have great memories. My mother was not an athlete, did not like sports. She liked to watch them. She did not like to play them. So I think it was really great. That's a very special thing that I have with my dad.
Yeah. And I want to reflect 2 of the things before we move on to the next part of the segment. Number 1, how beautiful is it that you, the person I know to be the personal trainer, coach, but also the bibliophile who loves to read and edit and share people's story, are a reflection of the person who wrote letters, handwritten letters every day, and the person who bought you your first helmet, and how nature, nurture, whatever you want to call it, no matter what your perception of that debate is, our parents have such a profound impact on who we are and how we show up in the world. And it is my fundamental belief that one generation of supremely loving parents can change the world and all of the problems we face. So how beautiful. And then the second thing is my dad's life has been informed by pain from a young age. And my life is shaped by that, in the sense that all I wanted was somebody to go out and play outside with me. And to this day, I think the reason why I prioritize that so much with my daughters is that I didn't get that. And for listeners who are, maybe wanting to be inspired by this, you can either have the parents become the parents you had, or you can become the parents you wished you had. There's always that choice.
That's right. And here's the thing about that. My dad came from an abusive childhood. He was physically abused by his father, who was an alcoholic. His mother, my grandmother, walked out the door to get milk and never came back. So he was the child of a very broken relationship and a very broken home. He was one of 6. he chose to be the parent he didn't have. However, he could not have made that choice if he wasn't given the choice. So sometimes I think you look at the challenge as something that happened to you. My dad is the first time I understood that you can choose something and have it happen for you. So it's an important comment that you made there, Tony. You do have a choice, but that's only because you're given a contrast to make it.
And it takes me back to something he said in the episode, which talking about being a problem solver, he says, look at the problem, not the emotion, but look at the problem itself. And yeah, I think your approach to it is a little bit even more leveled up or sophisticated. It's like feel first, but then minimize into or focus into the actual problem itself. Now that we've had the opportunity to share such a beautiful conversation about your family and your upbringing, I want to spotlight and highlight Kelli, the coach. Can you discuss the ways in which what inspires you to put good into the world every day?
I'm not sure what inspires me. I'll say that absolutely came from my mother. My mother was all about being kind and compassionate. That's who she was. It didn't matter if she was waiting in the grocery store line, helping the person in front of her, or teaching her first graders, or the work she did at Jonah's Attic, which, was a thrift store before thrifting was cool, for the church, where she raised money for the church, a very strong woman of faith. And so she instilled that value in me about how important it is to be kind and compassionate, that everybody is valuable and worthy, and that you treat everybody with the respect that they deserve. That's who she was. And so it is just part of that, nature nurture thing. That's one of the nurturing genes I got, that she instilled that in me. So that's important to me. It's a value.
And we've personally benefited in such tremendous ways from your kindness and your compassion. We want to talk about some of the ways our listeners might be able to also benefit.
Yeah. So you lead a life coaching program called Finding My Way Back to Me, based on your best-selling book. With both the book and the program, you aspire to help move beyond feeling stuck, anxious, worried, or depressed, with 8 tools to help people to become the person that they are meant to be. I'm wondering if you can please share more about those tools and your coaching program for some of our listeners who might be interested.
So when I was a trainer and I owned Studio 8 Fitness, which was my brick and mortar training facility, I also by then had my master's in psychology. I knew that I was a coach. It's just sort of in me. And so I was certainly having people do bicep curls, but we were also doing life coaching as they were doing their things. And then I started incorporating the movement with the exercises. So for example, one of the exercises, one of those steps is I am statements. And as they would write their I am statements, and then they would go up on the box, either step up or jump up and state their I am statement. So we added the physical movement to just ingrain that just a little bit more. So I was realizing I was doing that, but I wasn't necessarily doing it in an order or with any system in place. And so I thought I need to just sit down and really download what I'm doing in a way that makes sense, that could be repeatable, replicatable. And the experience was I woke up in the middle of the night out of some kind of dream, bolt upright as you do sometimes, with this idea in my head and all 8 steps right there. And I wrote them on a piece of paper next to my bed. And in the morning, I came back to them and I said, yeah, this is really what I'm doing. I'm kind of leading them through this arc without necessarily realizing that's what I was doing at the moment. But it became an easy 8 steps. 8 is my number. So it was an 8-step process. And the whole idea really is, and then it moved away from the movement. It certainly incorporated movement, but it was something that could stand alone, didn't have to have exercise with it. It could be a coaching program on its own. The concept behind it is we often get stuck because we are focused on one side of the coin. We're focused on the side of the coin of all the things we don't want. So we get really stuck on, I don't want to live this life anymore. I don't want to be in this relationship. I don't want my kids to act this way. I don't want my spouse to not back me up. I don't want. and we begin this repetitive pattern. And the more we focus on something, and you guys, I'm sure, speak to this, the more it expands, right? Where focus goes, energy flows. And the more you focus on something, the bigger it gets. So the more you focus on what you don't want, guess what you get? More of what you don't want. So the first step is, let's just recognize that that's where we are, and really notice and become aware of the don't wants that we're focused on. And then the cool thing, and this is a very big aha moment for people, is the moment they realize that, literally flip the coin over, because it's two sides of the same coin. What you don't want exists in the same sphere as what you do want. It's just the other side. So if you don't want your kids to behave this way, you do want kids who are well behaved. If you don't want your spouse to not back you up, you do want your spouse to back you up, right? So it seems so simple, but sometimes we're so focused and we get so lost in the negativity, the swirling vortex of negativity, I like to call it, that we get stuck there and we're swirling. And it can be something as simple as that. Write down the thing that you're focused on and then flip the statement. Now let's dive and pour energy into what you do want. Because again, the more you focus on it, the more it expands and the more of it you get. And so step 2 is that, and then it goes on from there. So, that's a coaching program. It's written in the book. You can literally do it yourself. If you purchase the book, it's right there. There's lines for you to write it down. I walk you through it. But it was a pretty effective way to get people out of being stuck and moving again. And then they can slowly work their way toward where they're going.
Incredible.
That's a wonderful, wonderful insight. And it's interesting as you're talking about that, I was thinking about, we try to practice gentle parenting with Emery, and our oldest is a toddler. She's 2.5, almost 3 years old. And one of the skills that I have learned in my journey as a parent is the idea of, instead of telling them to stop doing something, try to replace the behavior with what you want them to do. And when I first heard of this, it was like a light bulb went off in my head. And trying it with her, it was amazing how effective it was. Instead of saying, don't climb on the chair, you say, can you please sit down in the chair? And it gives her the action that, I would like her to, the ideal goal for both of us. And she was so much more receptive to that, because it's not just getting down on her about something, it's, can we do this instead? And so that is just such a foundational, wonderful concept. And yet when I started, it was so hard. I had to really think about it. And I like what you're saying about this idea of, over time, that positive psychology and reinforcing and practicing that, much easier it becomes. And so I just think that's a wonderful tool, whether you're working with a child or you're working with yourself, this idea of replacing the negative and instead focusing on the positive of, what do we want then? I think that's wonderful. So thank you for sharing.
That's great. That's a great example of that too, Amanda. That's exactly right. We spend a lot of time as parents telling our kids what not to do. And guess what they do? More of it.
Yeah. Well, and think about how it's a continuing cycle then they have this worldview or perception of the things that they shouldn't do, right? And then they grow up and become parents. And so it's really interesting. I think all of us are trying to kind of break certain cycles, and maybe this is part of that, at least for one little person, right? Instead of getting down on the negatives, trying to start out that whole parenting process with focusing on the positive or what the next best steps are.
There's 2 other things that I took from your answer that are especially profound and worthy of renoting. It's first is combining visualization or affirmation with movement, right? That's the basis of walking meditation in some respects, but it's also the idea that to supplant some things in our mind, we must move our body. And like you said earlier, push old emotions, old thoughts aside and accept the idea that we are what we think in many ways. And then the second thing is, where we put our focus, energy flows and life grows.
Yes.
And I think it's a testament to who you are and how you show up as a coach that so many people have been benefited by how you show up in the world and where you focus and how you help people gain those insights. Another way that you do that is through the impact coaching program that you lead with our dear friend, Todd Durkin. Can you discuss more about that program? I know you have an upcoming version of it coming up, but who's it for and what does it offer?
Yes, great. In fact, it kicked off yesterday. So
Right on.
literally coming up. So so Todd Durkin, for those of you who don't know that name, is very well known in the fitness industry. He's been in the fitness industry for a long time, and many people might recognize him because he was Drew Brees' trainer, now good friend. They trained together for many, 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 many years. So he made a name for himself in the fitness industry, and then realized that his calling was bigger, and he started going out and not just speaking at fitness conferences or training events, but he would get a call to go speak at a high school or go speak at a medical conference or a financial management firm or insurance company and all these other places that were other industries. And he's a very motivational person. He's got great energy. You guys are laughing. He's got great energy. If you ever have a chance to follow him, you can listen to his podcast on the Todd Durkin Impact Show. And so people, would be as motivated as we all have been when we've been in his presence, and they'd say, okay, I want more. And we had nothing more because we were so, ingrained in the fitness space, but we didn't have something to offer to anybody that was in any other space. That's when we developed Impact Coaching, and we realized we could offer a coaching program for anybody who is in any spot in their life looking to level up. So maybe it's leveling up in your relationship or leveling up in your career or promotion or fitness or whatever it is that you just need to get to the next level. We could offer this coaching program. So we ran it as Impact Coaching for a couple of years. And then coming out of the pandemic, when we were sitting down to think about how the next iteration of it and how we could best serve people, we were realizing that, as deep and troublesome and challenging as the pandemic was, any time in history when we have gone through as a human species, any kind of challenge like that, worldwide challenge, the opportunity for growth as you come out of it is like a springboard, right? There is so much opportunity to grow. And at one point, Todd's like, yes, it's like God size. And that's when we were like, oh, it's God-sized dreams now. So we took Impact Coaching and we elevated it. We got much more tangible product for people that want to go through that. And we created this God-sized dreams program. So now we ran it in the spring and we literally kicked it off yesterday. So God-sized dreams is, again, for anybody out there at any walk of life, at any stage, parents, not parents, corporate executives, teachers, it doesn't matter who. If you're at a spot where you feel like you might need some help to level up in any capacity, then it's a program for you. Tony and Amanda, you can speak so strongly because you're such wonderful coaches and you've had such wonderful coaches. The power of having a coach is something very special. I often say people can achieve great things on their own. I mean, people are amazing, right? We can achieve a lot just on our own. We can get a lot of our goals or we can do a lot of things, but people can achieve extraordinary things when they have somebody beside them supporting them and helping them get there. And that's what a coach does. They help you see what you can't see. They help you process things you can't process. They help you create strategies that you can't see on your own. And then they hold you accountable to getting it done. So you can't run away from it. You have somebody there, as we would say in the fitness industry, right? Cracking the whip, to help you do it, to help you get there. Because we certainly are, as a human species, very likely to not always keep going forward. We can always find reasons not to. So a coach will hold your feet to the fire and help you get there. So that's what that program's all about. And, coaching with Todd is an incredible honor. And I'm very humbled by my experience with him. And he's quite a visionary. He's such a heart-centered, authentic person, as you both know. And it is truly, truly a blessing to be part of his coaching staff.
Two things before I move on a bit. Number one, crisis always meets opportunity on an individual level, on a familial level, on a cultural level. And if anyone's out there struggling, if anyone out there is hurting deeply, just know that there's something on the other side of pain, and that, the darkest moments often lead to the greatest opportunities for light. Light shines through darkness. And the second thing that I heard you say that's so powerful is the power of community and collaboration, which is Todd's word of the year, right? The power of collaboration. We wouldn't be having this conversation if without Todd. We wouldn't be having this conversation without the meaningful impact you've created in our life. And hopefully that will also impact the people that we're listening to, so that we're never alone, right? That there's always someone you can reach out to in your moments of great hurt to transform and create that opportunity. And then also published by Scripter Publishing is the God-Sized Dreams Planner, which we are working through as a couple. So if there are any couples listening that want to level up their life.
Go very far from me.
Yeah. And I think it is beautifully done, by the way. I think I've known Todd's systems for several years now, and it's so cool to see his Google Doc that I followed 2 years ago and did 2 years ago turn into this with that many more bells and whistles added. And it just goes to show that we are always evolving and growing, even when you get to his levels.
Absolutely right. That's right.
And I guess finally, we want to discuss, speaking of God-sized dreams, and we've talked about this earlier, we believe that the universe puts people together for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. Can you discuss the role of faith or spirituality in what you do as a person, parent, partner, and coach?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so important. Again, lessons from my mom. Faith is the axle that I rotate around. And I think that it is important for everybody to recognize that we are more than a physical body, that there is something inside of us that is much bigger than us. I think it's important for people to realize that because of that, we are all connected, that spiritual part of us is what makes us all connected. And I think if you can see that and you can feel that, you can work with that in your own way to find whatever that means for you. Because everybody has their own spiritual walk and they all have, their own way of getting to faith. But for me, faith is a pillar. It's an axle that I can roll myself around. It's always there. It's always steady. It is something that comes through me. It's not me. It's through me. It's my connection to a higher power. In my case, it's God, but universal energy, something bigger than me. And when I tap into it, I know it, I feel it, I know that I'm centered, and then everything else unfolds from there. Everything else will unfold from there. It's that space where kindness and compassion are, but it's also that space where there's contentment and confidence and connection. Lots of C words. So that's what it is for me. But I do think it's important. I think it's important for everybody to find their way to that in whatever method or manner you do and whatever way you practice that. It is there and it's always running through you and it's always connecting you. And so if you can find your way to it, it's amazing how life flows completely differently.
Powerful stuff. And we want to take time to just honor who you are and the lessons you've taught us and continue to teach us as we work to shine our light on the world. And I want to just specifically state that you've been there and through some really dark times in our journey. And without you, I don't know where we'd be where we are today. So if nothing else, I want you to know how special you are in our lives. And I want our listeners to realize how important it is to have a coach and that you're not alone. So thank you, Kelli.
Thank you so much.
Well, it's absolutely my pleasure. And I would be remiss to not be able to say this to you as well. Watching the two of you grow and create this new brand together, to create this new family together is so beautiful from my perspective as well. To see you finding your way to this new path of being able to share your experience with those who are listening, those out there who are living the same experiences and needing some guidance and needing to know they're not alone, because you have lived through that and you're living through that, you can share it. So my heart goes out to you, and my congratulations to both of you. You have 2 books coming out very, very quickly here, actually soon. 2 beautiful children's books, the first of many. If you're a listener out there and you haven't seen those, please look for them. 2 of the most beautiful children's books that you 2 have written, and much more to come. You guys are sort of on this beginning of a trajectory, and I think people listening can hear it. And I can see it as I've known and worked with you over the past couple of years, because you're hitting your stride, you're finding that flow, you're getting that synchronization that you've been wanting and searching for. And it's just going to expand to allow you guys to impact so many more people. So thank you for letting me be a part of the journey, but also congratulations. And it's such a pleasure and a joy to work with you too.
Yes. And if anyone wants to find you on social media, how can they find you?
I am on Facebook and Instagram. It's Kelli Watson 88 on Instagram and Kelli O'Brien Watson on Facebook. You can find me at todddurkin.com. You can find me at scripterpublishinggroup.com. So websites if you're interested in finding me there as well.
Thank you so much, Kelli. I hope you have a wonderful day. It's been a great conversation.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Wow, what an episode. Thank you for listening. We hope you took some meaningful tools and skills that empower you to become your highest self in every way.
We also hope you'll help us spread our messages of solidarity, social support, and consciousness raising by subscribing to our YouTube channel at Mindful and Fit and offering us an honest 5-star review wherever you listen to podcasts.
Doing so helps more people hear these important messages of love, healing, and becoming.
And as always, much love from the Johnson family. We hope you make today amazing.
Just like you.